The air in my parents' house still smelled like cinnamon and floor polish the day my life became a meme in Mexico City. I'd just finished dinner, a quietly tense affair of tamales and closed faces, when my younger cousin Carlos shoved his phone at me, snickering. "Is this you?" he asked over the laughter. On that cheap screen glowed my own face, smeared with exhaustion and hope, lifted from the promotional video I'd made for my Kickstarter. There was a hashtag, too. Something cruel. Artista de Excel. I reached for the phone and felt the heat rise in my cheeks. The clip was edited to make me look like a clown. Me, explaining my data dreams project to a borrowed camera in my shared bedroom. Cut with flashing graphics of spreadsheets and sound effects, honks, laugh tracks, a donkey braying. Someone had set the whole thing to a reggaeton beat. "That's not real art," my aunt scoffed from the kitchen. My father, at the table, didn't look up from his Sudoku. Even my mother, who'd always been the gentle one, sucked her teeth in disgust. I handed the phone back and tried to laugh with the others. Someone's uncle called out from across the room. "Ay, Esteban, what's next? Becoming a PowerPoint Picasso?" And the older cousins cackled. The humiliation stuck to my skin like cold sweat. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone in the utility room I used for an office, scrolling through my notifications. Hundreds of strangers mocking me in the comments. Tears burned in my eyes, but I forced myself to read each jeer. Something inside me hardened. I pressed my palm into the surface of the cheap particle board desk, careful not to make a sound. My dream was ridiculous, I knew, but only because nobody else could see what I saw. I wanted to tell stories with data, to use numbers and code, to reveal secrets in ways that caught the breath. I wanted to be a data artist, carving shapes from patterns, making sense feel like revelation. In Mexico City, people liked their artists poor and their dreams practical. I was neither. The memes spread, infecting every corner of my tiny world. At the panaderia, the baker's wife gave me a sly smile and a "¿Ya vendiste tu Mona Lisa de Excel?" On the metro, two teenagers recognized me, whispering and laughing loud enough for me to hear. The Kickstarter failed. Of course it failed. Every humiliation pressed me down, but beneath the humiliation was something else, a flicker of defiance. I woke up every day and made another spreadsheet, another set of code, almanacs of water shortages, earthquake histories, police abuses, all rendered in colors and lines until the raw patterns told stories anyone could understand. At night I scrolled again, reading the jokes, but also the handful of messages from strangers, not from my city, not from my family. People who said my work was weird, but kind of beautiful. Each word like a drop of cold water on a fevered forehead. Months passed. I moved out, first to a rented room in a crumbling building near Metro Mixcoac, sharing space with 4 other artists and students. Later, I got a job at a data visualization firm, nothing glamorous. Mostly infographics for boring corporate presentations, but it paid for independence. I was careful, always saving whatever pesos I could. My life sorted itself into a shape. Early mornings, long commutes on the metro, days hunched over code, nights spent feeding my own projects, dream by dream, pixel by pixel. Sometimes the loneliness tore at me. Friday nights staring at a glowing screen while my old friends posted party photos from Coyoacán. Sundays, scrolling through my family's WhatsApp group as they shared potluck photos I was never invited to. Loneliness and shame with every update, my cousins still joking whenever they remembered I existed. But time is a river. Year by year, the laughter faded. New memes replaced mine. Fresh punchlines arrived. I kept working, quietly, stubbornly. The work improved. My code became cleaner. My art gathered more subtlety. Then one night, I got a message from a stranger. She was a curator at a small gallery in La Roma, interested in a piece I'd posted online. a swirling data map showing Mexico City's lost rivers layered over present-day metro stations. Half in fear, half in hope, I agreed to meet her. When I arrived the next week, she was waiting with coffee in hand, calm and bright-eyed. We talked for hours about pattern and story, about putting numbers to emotion and how art can open eyes. She invited me to submit work for a group show. The exhibition was called Patterns in the Pulse. There wasn't money, but there was respect. I stood in the corner behind a cluster of strangers, watching people's faces as they approached my piece. For the first time, nobody laughed. I started to get commissions. Small at first, an interactive display on traffic fatalities for a safety NGO, census data murals for a neighborhood's community center. I worked on weekends, on holidays, chasing one opportunity after another. I learned how to write grants, how to speak at panels. My work became less an oddity, more a curiosity, then eventually a calling card. Years rolled by. I changed jobs, building a freelance life that was unpredictable, but mine. I presented in conferences. First in Mexico City, then Guadalajara, then Sao Paulo, Madrid, London. Every presentation a battlefield with my own self-doubt. But the world was changing. People started to see value in what I did. Data artistry became fashionable. Occasionally, my mother would send a congratulations on WhatsApp, but never a call. My father never mentioned the past. The year I was invited to create a major installation for the Museo Tamayo began no different than the others. I still lived in a modest apartment, now alone, with mottled brick walls and a tiny balcony overlooking the thoroughfare. The day after Christmas, I got an email. The museum wanted a piece for their Urban Myths series, visualizing how the city's stories and fact tangled together. They'd seen my work. They liked its clarity and ambition. It took months of sketches, revisions, sleepless nights. I mapped rumors and archival documents. The ghost rivers, the hidden tunnels, the disappeared. My piece became a living city projection mapped onto a three-dimensional sculpture, animated with real-time data and decades of oral history. It glowed and shifted as visitors walked around it. The week before the opening, my mother called. She cleared her throat 3 times before speaking, as she always did when nervous. "Esteban," she said, "your father and I, well, Tamayo is a big deal, though. Would you like us to come to the opening?" I hesitated only a moment. "Of course," I said, heart knocking in my chest. "I'll leave tickets at the front desk." A few days later, my cousin Carlos messaged me. "My parents want to know if they can come too." I said yes. Word spread. Within 48 hours, half my extended family had found excuses to. On opening night, I stood at the edge of the vast white-walled gallery, stomach churning. The room was unrecognizable from my old world. Strangers in tailored jackets, journalists with cameras, artists I'd idolized since university milling among the guests. The city's night pressed close outside the windows, neon and darkness and the hum of the Reforma. My family arrived all together, a noisy, overdressed flock. My father wore a tie, already loosened around a neck gone softer with age. My mother clung to her purse, eyes darting around the shining room. Carlos, taller and bulkier now, leaned in, sheepish. "Looks cool, primo," he muttered. My aunt stood behind him, eyes sharp and searching. Even the cousins who had joined the meme pile were here, though their laughter had dimmed. The museum director stood by the entrance, hands clasped. She wore a crisp suit and a small smile. Slowly, the room quieted. I was called to the center, asked to speak. Under all those lights, my voice shook, but I steadied it. I explained my process, how the city's invisible patterns shaped our lives, how beauty and truth could be found in the same spreadsheet, how data was a language, a way of reclaiming our stories. Then, at the signal, the gallery lights dimmed, and my piece came alive. the city flashing and growing, pulses of color crawling across walls and looping onto the sculpture. A dance of ghost rivers and traffic jams and whispered legends. The crowd hushed. I couldn't help it. I looked directly at my family. My father's eyes were wide, blinking in the dark, the bow of his lips slack with surprise. My mother stared, open-mouthed, years dropping from her face. Even my aunt, always the skeptic, stepped forward, reached a hesitant hand toward the glowing sculpture, as if to touch it would explain how a ridiculous dream had built something so undeniable. Around us, people buzzed and pointed, voices rising with excitement. A journalist leaned close to my mother and asked her how it felt to have a son who inspired the city. The old baker elbowed a cousin. "That's our neighborhood there. Look." Data, rendered as poetry, spun around us in colored light. Someone from the museum staff led my father into the sculpture's interior, where the sound of the city played. Real-time traffic, voices, laughter, caught and mixed through speakers. I watched him stand quietly, hands behind his back, head tilted. For the first time in years, he seemed lost for words. Afterwards, as people milled and I shook hands with strangers, my mother pulled me to one side behind a column, her fingers tight on my sleeve. Tears sparkled in her eyes. "I'm sorry, mi hijo," she whispered. "We didn't understand. I didn't see what you saw." Her apology was softer than any praise. I pressed her hand to my cheek and closed my eyes. When the crowd thinned, I found my father again. He stood facing the sculpture, watching the data pulse and shift. Without turning, he spoke. "You made something last, Esteban. You made your mark." He took my shoulder, squeezed it, and for a moment it was as if we were back in that old kitchen, before the shame, before the memes. He didn't have to say he was proud. I understood it in the weight of his hand. The party raged on outside, among the city lights. My family gathered around, posing for photos, pointing out landmarks they recognized within the shifting patterns on the sculpture. Carlos watched me, grinning, a little of the old mischief in his eyes, but something like respect as well. The night ended slowly, with handshakes and embraces, museum staff pushing gently toward the doors. My family spilled out into the usual chaos of Reforma, laughing at themselves for how lost they were among the city's night buses and taco stands. I lagged behind a bit, letting the energy wash over me. Neon washed the wet pavement. The smells of roasted elote and car fumes drifted on the air. My parents paused, looking back at me once more. My father nodded. My mother waited for me to catch up, and as I did, she tucked her arm into mine, something she hadn't done since I was a child.